The amount of vignettes in our client's life and the people close to them are really unlimited. And so I think we've learned as a community over time that good guy evidence, I mean, we would call it that for shorthand, good guy. Do we have any good guy evidence? That we thought we needed some of that too. It wasn't just enough to show that there was a lot of exposure to violence and all these other things, that we needed something that helped show some warmth and humanity. And Boyd Young and I were trying a case in 2005 when Katrina and Rita were happening here in New Orleans. And we were in our own world of trauma in Brunswick, Georgia, trying to live through a capital trial. And I think we could have gotten the case pled, and the client wouldn't do it, and it was very contentious. He was a 6-week Marine Corps guy. So he lasted, got through basic and then went AWOL. And, 92 to 88 IQ and had all the answers. Clearly would be, if we re-enfranchise the right to vote for convicted felons, he clearly would be a Trump voter and influencer, bundler for Trump. He was a tough kind of white guy. And I had a strained relationship with him because I'd really pushed hard to get the plea down. So he didn't, like me, the lawyer before, not Boyd, the lawyer before had told him he's the first innocent death penalty client he'd ever had. Upon review of the discovery, I was less sure about that, statement. But it was really hard to get him to move to resolution. And I had a tough relationship, and yet I was going around, and the mitigation person had done great work, and she'd worked hard for years and had all these witnesses, and I was going around meeting them, and I just kept hearing these stories about what an amazing dad my little knucklehead was. An amazing dad. He had one adopted son, 2 sons naturally, all the different things he did. I mean, this family had no money. And the PlayStations, where the kid would have the PlayStation under the tree, and then they'd play together for the next week. And I mean, just spending quality time with these children. There were stories about mud bogging. Anybody know what a mud bogging is? You get in that 4-wheel drive and you get in the mud. And I guess the fun is getting stuck. And then you spend the day trying to get out of the mud. Go figure that one. I'd rather watch Netflix. But this was a father on Saturdays with his 3 boys strapped into a truck that never had all of its parts. And they'd go out mud bogging all over South Georgia and get stuck. And he was there with his kids, laughing and loving. And there were stories from these witnesses about wiffle ball. Now, I used to have a pretty mean screwball with a wiffle ball. Wiffle balls were great to throw if any of you have ever played. They move all around. These folks would have, outside of their single-wide trailer in rural, I think one of the smallest counties in the state of Georgia, about 40 miles from the coast, inland, in the second poorest county in the state of Georgia, they would have these epic August wiffle ball games where Buddy would come home from work and get the boys outside, and the wife would have made dinner, and they never ate dinner because they would play until the fireflies came out at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. The boys would have to go to bed, and they'd go to bed with burned soup or whatever was made, filled with laughter and love in that house. Because that was the Buddy that I didn't know, but the people around him knew. I knew a knothead. They knew a beautiful human being. And so I got to go around and meet these folks and hear their stories, and it was fascinating. So I had all this stuff, and we started to sort of piece down and come up with the closing argument. And we had all this, I guess what in shorthand we would call good guy evidence, and we had a lot of stuff for Buddy. And so we as a team sat together and worked it out, like, what are our themes? Well, our theme is, hey, Buddy's a great father. Hey, Buddy's a great father to his natural kids. Buddy's a great father to his adopted son. Buddy's been a great father since he's been locked up. Buddy's still a great father. Buddy will be a great father in the future if you don't kill him. We had all this, we'd broken this down to all these things. And then I think I heard somebody from this community talk about how to frame these themes. And it was really helpful. And this fabulous lawyer, David Runkey, would say, no, themes have to be where the prosecutor can get up and say, so what? They can't get up and say, that's BS. They have to say, so what? They can't say, not so. And I'm like, huh? What does that mean? And so we had all this stuff about Buddy being great, and we were making Buddy out to be, in one of my early drafts of what I hoped the closing argument would be, we had Buddy being a candidate for Father of the Year. And what's the problem with that? I would say Father of the Year, don't kill the Father of the Year, don't kill the Father of the Year, and then I sit down, and what's the prosecutor, first thing he's going to say, once he throws his legal pad across the room and gets back for rebuttal? What's he going to say? Yeah. The dead guy doesn't get to be a father. Fathers of the Year aren't in prison. That's an asshole. That's an inhuman. That's a monster. Take him down. Take him out. So by calling him Father of the Year, Buddy Woodall's a Father of the Year. Don't kill him. I opened the door to them saying, not so. Not so. But if we reframe it and say Buddy Woodall was an involved father, Buddy Woodall was an involved father for his 2 sons. Buddy Woodall was an involved father for his adopted son. Buddy Woodall was an involved father before the arrest. Buddy Woodall's been an involved father since the arrest. Buddy Woodall will remain an involved father if he's not executed for the rest of his life. That's Buddy Woodall. An involved father, all the prosecutor can say is, big deal. That's not we've got reasons to kill here. They're just talking about, his kids. And so they get into this thing, they're fighting on our turf then, because the law is any reason for a life sentence is mitigating. Any reason for a life sentence. So the fact that he's an involved father is classic Tenard versus Dretke mitigation, at least until the Supreme Court changes it. Which may happen in October, but for today anyway, for this year's seminar, any reason for a life sentence. And the fact that Buddy Woodall's an involved father, and we can show that through 20 vignettes about wiffle ball and mud bogging and PlayStations, which all seem kind of frothy and light, don't they? Except that it's true. So the fact that he's an involved father, if you care about that juror, you can give that the weight of life by itself or in combination with other mitigation. Not that hard. So that problem we talked about earlier about connecting with a juror and then not empowering them to know what to do with it, by rephrasing it and by packaging it together, we show them what they can do with it. And I really think it's that simple, and I think Richard will talk about this some in voir dire. We plant some of these seeds in voir dire about mitigation's any reason for a life sentence. There may be evidence, blah, 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 blah. Then you get into the opening and you say, you're going to hear a lot of mitigation. Remember, mitigation's any reason for a life sentence. You're going to hear evidence that Buddy Woodall was an involved father. There are nights, regular nights, after a hard day's work, he'd come home. He wouldn't go in and turn on the TV and tune out the family. No. He would go outside, exhausted from working 2 jobs, and play wiffle ball with his 3 boys until it got too dark to see that ball anymore. He would play wiffle ball, 98 degrees, mosquitoes everywhere, and that yard would be filled with laughter and love. The neighbors' kids would come down and play because that was the house where all the good things were happening in the summertime outside that single-wide trailer. You're going to hear this witness tell those stories about those games of wiffle ball in August in Brantley County, whatever, Georgia, blah, 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 blah. And that shows that he's an involved father, and you'll be able to consider that in your closing as a reason for a life sentence. And then in closing, you do the same thing. You don't retell the story. You go, remember? So-and-so witness told about the wiffle ball. That mitigating theme is Buddy Woodall was an involved father. That's really beyond dispute. He was involved playing wiffle ball, mud bogging, PlayStation. You heard those witnesses tell those stories. He's been involved with those children. You saw the video, you had the jail guard. He remains involved with those children. And if you sentence him to a life sentence, he'll remain in their lives being a positive influence for the rest of his life for those boys. you may vote for life because he's an involved father, if that's right for you. And then you just move on. It's not really all that hard. One little practice pointer that I learned by mistake, when you have a little story that, and this can be whether it tugs at your heartstring or whether it's hitting somebody in the kitchen with a shoe, find your best storyteller. It's not us, it's a witness. Find your best storyteller and have them tell the story. And stop. If there are 3 people who see the fight, or 5 people who are involved in wiffle ball, don't tell it 5 times. Don't tell it 5 times. They end up impeaching each other. The 5th one's lame. Just because they were out there doesn't mean they get to tell the story. Find your most compelling storyteller and ride them for everything you can. Milk that story and stop. You can have them talk about who else was out there playing wiffle ball. And when that witness might pop up to tell another story, you go, were you involved with wiffle ball too? Was Sally Sue there? Yep, she was there. That's it. I don't need any more about wiffle ball from that guy. He's not my storyteller there. He was a C-. She was an A. We're going with the A storyteller. Does that make sense?